Oh, hello. Yes, this is the Crowfly shirt and this mug from my merch store. What up, everybody? I wonder if now that I got a new graphics card, if my chat is not going to vanish on me because I don't see it vanishing anywhere yet, which is awesome. What up, Terrence? Jack. What's up, bad vibes? Hey, thank you. Thank you. And I know there's not a lot of you on right now, but I just want to tell everybody thank you for all the support when my graphics card died, my computer died, and it wouldn't start again. Yeah, thank you, bad vibes. And I had no way to fix that. I had no way to fix that. I'm disabled. I can't work anymore. And so if something like that happens, I'm screwed. Like I literally just barely pay my bills. And I didn't have any way, but people got together, man. Hey, Mandy, people got together and people helped me out. People like Jack and Four Warnings and Johnny, and they started spamming my PayPal, and people came out of the woodwork to help me. And I really appreciate that. Hey, what's up, Drac? But yeah, I really appreciate everybody helping me out like that. That meant a lot to me. Hey, meow. So, and also I've decided that any money that ends up in my PayPal, any money at all, because it's all related to this, my narrations and stuff like that. Oh, no, my chat still vanishes, by the way. But any money that ends up in my PayPal, whether it's through Patreon, whether it's through my merch store or just donations to PayPal, I'm going to keep in there to save up to probably eventually replace the computer all the way, or to buy components if I need it, if I get all that stuff taken care of, to get a better mic, things that are for narrations and stuff like that. And so anything that I get is going to be for this. What? What was what? Oh, I'm not going to spend any of it on weed. Yeah, man. I ain't going to spend that on weed, man. What are you talking about? Really? The video spazzed out? Can anyone confirm that? Did the live stream glitch out? What do you mean spazzed out? Huh. Interesting. Thank you, April. Huh. That's odd. I wonder why I did that. It didn't for Mandy, though. Huh. I don't know what to tell you. So, I guess, well, let's start this out normal. Oh. Damn you, Deckard Cain. You let me down, dude.
Stay a while and listen.
Yes. Stay a while and listen. I don't know, because it didn't do anything on my screen, and if some people seen it and some people didn't, it's doing it again right now. I don't see it doing it. Like I'm looking over there at the live screen the live stream right now. All right, I'm gonna watch the live stream for a minute and see if it glitches out. It was pink. I don't understand. Oh, wait, Devil Jock just sent me a screenshot. What the hell? What the hell? Well, that's really odd. Huh. Yeah, that's really odd. Huh. All right. So I suppose I am going to start reading. I'm going to keep it on the live stream, like not the normal thing that I would look at, just so I can see if it does that. So I got this. Got this here book right here. And I guess I'll read a story. Start off with Dagon. I am writing this under the appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more, penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable. I can bear the torture no longer. I shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone on a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast onto the shore of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared. I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream infested, was continuous. When blah blah blah. When at last I awakened, it was to discover myself half stuck into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in undu- monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. Hey, Haley. For there, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of describ other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast stretch of black slime, yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was ablaze down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which, for innumerable millions of years, had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might, nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. Excuse me. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a far-away hummock which rose higher than any other elevation in the rolling desert. That night I encamped, and on the following day still traveled towards the hummock. Though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it, by the fourth evening I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley, setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface, too wary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parched sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the immense. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down to the other side into the immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illuminate. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost and Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. The ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, thus after a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian depths where no light had yet penetrated. All at once my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express, for despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Hello, everybody. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that far-flung body of water flown at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writings was in a system of hieroglyphs unknown to me, and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed in the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound, plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size was an array of bas reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Dor. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto or paying homage to some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer, they were damnably human in general outline despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into the past beyond conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections in the silent channel before me. Then suddenly I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like, and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, and while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds, I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm some time after I reached a boat. At any rate, I know that I heard peals of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in San Francisco Hospital, brought thither by the captain of an American ship, which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding an ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god, but soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only a transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account of the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow man. Often I ask myself if I could not have been a pure Often I ask myself if it could not have been a pure phantasm. A mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in an open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may this very moment be crawling and floundering in its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind, of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window! There's that. All right, so there go Dagon. Johnny, you made it, man. What's next? Shall we find out? Sinatra, are you still here? Is Sinatra still here? Hey, what's up, Reapers? No, it's not gone. Reaper, the poster's not gone. It's still there. It's just not in the picture. What was the name of that story you wanted me to read? Oh, Pickman's Model, right? All right. Pickman's Model. You needn't think I'm crazy, Elliot. Plenty of others have queerer prejudices than this. Why don't you laugh at Oliver's grandfather who won't ride in a motor? If I don't like that damn subway, it's my own business. And we got here more quickly anyhow in the taxi. We have had to walk up the hill from Park Street if we'd taken the car. I know I'm more nervous than I was when you saw me last year, but you don't need to hold a clinic over it. There's plenty of reason, God knows, and I'm lucky to be sane at all. Why the third degree? You didn't used to be so inquisitive. Well, if you must hear it, I don't know why you shouldn't. Maybe you ought to, anyhow, for you kept writing me like a grieved parent when you heard I'd begun to cut the art club, and keep away from the Pickman. Now that he's disappeared, I go around to the club once in a while, but my nerves aren't what they were. No, I don't know what's become of Pickman. I don't know, and I don't like to guess. You might have surmised I had some inside information when I dropped him, and that's why I don't want to think where he's gone. Let the police find what they can. It won't be much, judging from the fact that they don't know yet of the old North End place he hired under the name of Peters. And I'm not sure that I could find it again myself. Not that I'd ever try. Even in broad daylight. Yes, I do know, or I'm afraid I know, why he maintained it. I'm coming to that. And I think you'll understand before I'm through why I don't tell the police. They would ask me to guide them, but I couldn't go back there even if I knew the way. There was something there, and now I can't use the subway or, as you may as well have your laugh at this too, go down into cellars anymore. I should think you'd have known I didn't drop Pickman for the same silly reasons that fussy old woman like Dr. Reed or Joe Monet or Rosworth did. Morbid art doesn't shock me, and when a man has the genius Pickman had, I feel it an honor to know him. no matter what direction his work takes. Boston never had a greater painter than Richard Upton Pickman. I said it at first, and I'll say it still, and I never swerved an inch either when he showed that ghoul feeding that you remember was when Minot cut him. You know, it takes profound art and profound insight into nature to turn out stuff like Pickman's. Any magazine cover hack can splash paint around wildly and call it a nightmare or a witch's sabbath or a portrait of the devil. But only a great painter can make such a thing really scare or ring true. That's because only a real artist knows the actual anatomy of the terrible or the physiology of fear, the exact sort of lines and proportions that connect up with latent instincts or hereditary memories of fright, and the proper color contrasts and lighting effects to stir the dormant senses of strangeness. I don't have to tell you why a Fuseli really brings a shiver while a creep ghost story front frontis frontispiece frontispiece merely makes us laugh. There's something whose fellows catch beyond life, and they're able to make us catch for a second. Dora had it, Syme has it, and Angol Angora and Angarola Angarola of Chicago has it, and Pickman had it. So no man ever had it before, or I hope to heaven never will again. Don't ask me what it is they see. In ordinary art, there's all the difference in the world between a vital, breathing things drawn from nature or models in the artificial truck that commercial small fry reel off in a bare studio by rule. Well, I should say that the really weird artist has a kind of vision which makes models or summons up what amounts to actual scenes from the spectral world he lives in. Anyhow, he manages to turn out results that differ from the pretender's mince pie dreams in just about the same way that the life's painter's results differ from the concoctions of a correspondence school cartoonist. If I had ever seen what Pickman saw, but no. Here, let us have a drink before we get any deeper. Gad, I wouldn't be alive if I'd ever seen what that man, if he was a man, saw. You recall that Pickman's forte was faces. I don't believe anybody since Goya could put so much sheer hell into a set of features or a twist of expression. And before Goya, you have to go back to the medieval chaps who did the gargoyles and the chimeras on Notre Dame and, and Mount St. Michael. They believed all sorts of things, and maybe they saw all sorts of things too. For the Middle Ages had some curious phases. I remember you asking Pickman yourself. Yeah, I remember you asking Pickman yourself once, the year before you went away, wherever in thunder he got such ideas and visions. Wasn't that a nasty laugh he gave you? It was partly because of that laugh that Reed dropped him. Reed, had just taken up comparative pathology and was full of pompous inside stuff about the biological or evolutionary significance of this or that mental or physical symptom. He said Pickman repelled him more and more every day, and almost frightened him towards the last. And the fellow's features and expressions were slowly developing in a way that he didn't like, in a way that wasn't human. He had a lot of talk about diet and said Pickman must be abnormal and eccentric. I'm sorry you're lagging like that, Haley. Eccentric to the last degree. I suppose you told Reed, if you if you and he had any correspondence over it, that he'd let Pickman's painting get on his nerves or harrow up his imagination. I know I told him that myself then. But keep in mind that I didn't drop Pickman for anything like this. On the contrary, my admiration for him kept growing, for that ghoul feeding was a tremendous achievement. As you know, the club wouldn't exhibit it, and the Museum of Fine Arts wouldn't accept it as a gift. And I can add that nobody would buy it. So Pickman had it right in his house till he went. Now his father has it in Salem. You know, Pickman comes from old Salem stock and had a witch ancestor hanged in 1692. I got into that habit of calling on Pickman quite often, especially after I began making notes for a monograph on weird art. Probably it was his work which put the idea into my head, and anyhow I found him a mine of I found him a mind of data and suggestions when it came to develop it. He showed me all the paintings and drawings he had about, including some pen and ink sketchings that would, I verily believe, have gotten him kicked out of the club if many of the members had seen them. Before long, I was pretty nearly a devotee, and would listen for hours like a schoolboy to art theories and philosophic speculations wild enough to qualify him for the Danvers Asylum. My hero worship, coupled with the fact that people generally were commencing to have less and less to do with him, made him get very confidential with me. And one evening he hinted that if I were fairly close-mouthed and none too squeamish, he might show me something rather unusual, something a bit stronger than anything he had in his house. You know, he said, there are things that won't do for Newberry Street. Things that are out of place here. Things that can't be conceived here. Anyhow, it's my business to catch the overtones of the soul. You won't find those in a parvenu set of artificial streets on made land. Back Bay isn't Boston. It isn't anything yet because it has no time to pick up memories and attract local spirits. If there are any ghosts here, they're the tame ghosts of a salt marsh and a shallow cove. And I want human ghosts, the ghosts of being highly organized enough, the ghost of beings highly organized enough to have overlooked on hell and known the meaning of what they saw. The place for an artist to live is in the North End. If any esthete were sincere, he'd put up with the slums for the sake of the mass tradition. God, man, don't you realize that places like that weren't merely made, but actually grew? Generation after generation lived and felt and died there, and in the days when people weren't afraid to live and feel and die. Don't you know there was a mill on Copp's Hill in 1632, and that half the present street were laid out by 1650? I can show you houses that have stood 2 centuries and a half and more, houses that have witnessed what would make a modern house crumble into powder. What do moderns know of life and the forces behind it? You call the Salem witchcraft a delusion, but I'll wager my 4 times great-grandmother could have told you things. They hanged her on the gallows hill with a cotton Mather looking sanctimoniously on. Mather, damn him. Oh, with Cotton Mather, that was a person, looking sanctimoniously on. Mather, damn him, was afraid somebody might succeed in kicking free of this accursed cage of monotony. I wish someone had laid a spell on him or sucked his blood in the night. I can show you a house he lived in. I can show you another one that he was afraid to enter in spite of all his fine, bold talk. He knew things he didn't dare put into that stupid Mangolio or that puerile wonders of the invisible world. Look here. Do you know the whole North End once had a set of tunnels that kept certain people in touch with each other's houses and the burying ground and the sea? Let them persecute and persecute above ground. Things went on every day that they couldn't reach, and the voices laughed at night that they couldn't place. Why, man? Why, man? Out of 10 surviving houses built before 1700 and not moved since, I'll wager that in 8, I could show you something queer in the cellar. There's hardly a month that you don't read of workmen finding bricked up arches and wells leading nowhere in this or that old place as it comes down. You could see one near Henchman Street from the elevated last year. There were witches and what their spells summoned, pirates and what they brought in from the sea, smugglers, privateers. And I tell you, people knew how to live and how to enlarge the bounds of life in the old time. This wasn't the only world a bold and wise man could know. And to think of today in contrast with such pale pink brains that even a club of supposed artists gets shudders and convulsions of a picture goes beyond the feelings of a Beacon Street tea table. The only saving grace of the present is that it's too damn stupid to question the past very closely. What do maps and records and guidebooks really tell of the North End? Bah! At, at a guess, I'll guarantee to lead you to a 30 or 40 alleys in the networks of alleys north of Prince Street that aren't suspected by 10 living beings outside of the foreigners that swarm them. And what do those Dagos know of their meaning? No, Thurber, these ancient places are dreaming gorgeously and overflowing with wonder and terror and escapes from the commonplace. And yet there's not a living soul to understand or profit by them. Or rather, there's only one living soul. Interesting. For I haven't been digging around in the past for nothing. Hold on. Huh. Hey, you guys, how often is it glitching out? I don't know. I heard something move behind me. I don't know. I don't know what it was. Anyways, see here, you're interested in this sort of thing. What if I told you that I've got another studio up there where I can catch the night spirit of antique horror and paint things that I couldn't even think of in Newbury Street? Naturally, I don't tell those cursed old maids at the club, with Reed, damn him, whispering even as it is that I'm a sort of monster bound to the tagabon of reverse evolution. Yes, Thurber, I decided long ago that one must paint terror as well as beauty from life. So I did some exploring in places where I had reason to know terror lives. Oh, it's just the video, huh? I hope my... You know what I don't understand is that it's not doing it like when it's showing me my own picture. It's not doing that at all. So I don't get it. I've got a place that I don't believe 3 living Nordic men besides myself have ever seen. It isn't so very far from the elevated and distance goes, but it isn't so very far from the elevated as distance goes, but it's centuries away as the soul goes. I I took it because of the queer old brick well in the cellar. One one of the sort I told you about. The shack's almost tumbling down, and that nobody else would live there, and I'd hate to tell you how little I paid for it. The windows are boarded up, but I like that all the better, since I don't want daylight for what I do. I paint in the cellar, where the inspiration is thickest. But I have other rooms furnished on the ground floor. A Sicilian owns it, and I've hired it under the name of Peters. Now, if you're game, I'll take you there tonight. I think you'd enjoy the pictures, for as I've said, I've let myself go a bit there. It's no vast tour. I sometimes do it on the foot, for I don't want to attract attention with a taxi in such a place. We can take the shuttle at the South Station for Battery Street, and after that, the walk isn't much. Well, Elliot, there wasn't much for me to do after that. Harangue, but to keep myself from running instead of walking for the first vacant cab we could sight. We changed to the elevated at the South Station, and at about 12 o'clock had climbed down the steps at Battery Street and struck along the old waterfront past Constitution Wharf. I didn't keep track of the cross streets, and I can't tell you yet which it was we turned up, but I know it wasn't Greeno Lane. When did when did it turn? When we no, when we did turn, it was to climb through the deserted length of the oldest and dirtiest alley I ever saw in my life, with crumbling-looking gables, broken small-paned windows, and archaic chimneys that stood out half disintegrated against a moonlit sky. I don't believe there were 3 houses in sight that hadn't been standing in Cotton Mather's time. Certainly, I glimpsed at least 2 with an overhang, and once I saw a peaked roof line and once I thought I saw a peaked roof line of the almost forgotten pre-Gambrel type, though it, and though and though antiquarians though antiquarians tell us there are none left in Boston. From that alley, which had a dim light, we turned to the left into an equally silent and still narrower alley with no light at all, and in a minute made what I think was an obtuse angle bent towards the right in the dark. Not long after this, Pickman produced a flashlight and revealed an antediluvian, the fuck, 10-paneled door that looked damnably worm-eaten. Unlocking it, he ushered me into a barren hallway with what was once splendid dark oak paneling. Simple, of course, but thrillingly suggestive of the times of Andros and Phipps and the witchcraft. Then he took me through a door on the left, lit an oil lamp, and told me to make myself at home. Now, Elliot, I'm what the man in the street would call a fairly hard-boiled, but I'll confess that what I saw on the walls of that room gave me a bad turn. There were his pictures, you know, the ones he couldn't paint or even show in Newbury Street, and he was right when he said he had let himself go. Here, have another drink. I need one anyhow. There's no use in me trying to tell you what they were like, because the blasphemous horror, and the unbelievable loathsomeness and moral feoter came from simple touches quite beyond the power of words to classify. There was none of the exotic technique you see in Sidney Syme or any of the trans-Saturnian landscapes and lunar fungi that Clark Ashton Smith uses to freeze the blood. The backgrounds were mostly old churchyards, deep woods, cliffs by the sea, brick tunnels, ancient paneled rooms, or simple vaults of masonry. Copp's Hill burying ground, which could not be many blocks away from this very house, was a favorite scene. The madness and monstrosity lay in the figures of the foreground, for Pickman's morbid art was preeminently one of demonic portraiture. These figures were seldom completely human, but often approached humanity in varying degree. Most of the bodies, while roughly bipedal, had a forward slumping and vaguely canine cast. The texture of the majority was a kind of unpleasant rubberiness. Ugh, I can see them now. Their occupations, well, don't ask me to be too precise. They were usually feeding. I won't say on what. They were sometimes shown in groups in cemeteries or underground passages, and often appeared to be in battle over their prey, or rather their treasure trove. And what damnable expressiveness Pickman sometimes gave these sightless faces of this carnal booty. Occasionally, the things were shown leaping through open windows at night, or squatting on the chests of sleepers, worrying at their throats. The canvas showed a ring of them baying about a hanged witch on Gallows Hill, whose dead face held a close kinship to theirs. But don't get the idea that it was all about this hideous business of theme and setting which struck me faint. I'm not a 3-year-old kid, and I'd seen much like this before. It was the faces, Elliot, those accursed faces, that leered and slavered out of the canvas with the very breath of life. By God, man, I verily believe that they were alive. The nauseous wizard had the nauseous wizard had waked the fires of hell in pigment, and his brush had been a nightmare spawning wand. Give me that decanter, Elliot. There was one thing called the lesson. Heaven pity me that I ever saw it. Listen, you can fancy a squatting circle of nameless dog-like things in a churchyard teaching a small child how to feed like themselves. The price of a changeling, I suppose. You know the old myth about how the weird people leave their spawn in cradles in exchange for human babies they steal? Pickman was showing what happens to those stolen babies, how they grow up, and then I began to see a hideous relationship in the faces of the human and non-human figures. He was, in all his gradations of morbidity, between a frankly non-human and the degradedly human, establishing a sardonic linkage in evolution. The dog things were developed from mortals, and no sooner had I wondered what he made of their own young as left with mankind in the form of changelings than my eye caught a picture embodying that very thought. It was that of an ancient Puritan interior, a heavily beamed room with latticed windows, a settle, and a clumsy 17th century furniture, with the family sitting about while the father read from the scriptures. Every face but one showed nobility and reverence, but that one reflected the mockery of the pit. It was that of a young man in years, and no doubt belonged to a supposed son of that pious father. But in essence, it was the kin of the unclean things. It was their changeling, and in a spirit of supreme irony, Pickman had given the features a very presentable resemblance to his own. By this time, Pickman had lit a lamp in an adjoining room and was politely holding open the door for me, asking me if I would care to see his modern studies. I hadn't been able to give him much of my opinions. I was too speechless with fright and loathing, but I think he fully understood that I felt highly complimented. And now I wanted to assure you again, Elliot, that I'm no mollycoddle to scream at anything which shows a bit of departure from the usual. I'm middle-aged and decently sophisticated, and I guess you saw enough of me in France to know I'm not easily knocked out. Remember, too, that I'd just about recovered my wind and gotten used to those frightful pictures which turned colonial New England into some annex of hell. Well, in spite of all this, the next room forced a real scream out of me, and I had to clutch at the doorway to keep from kneeling over. The other chamber had shown a pack of ghouls and witches overrunning the world of our forefathers, but this one brought the horror into our own daily life. God, how that man could paint! There was a study called Subway Accident, in which a flock of the vile things were clambering up from some unknown catacomb through a crack in the floor of the Boylston Street subway and attacking a crowd of people on the platform. Another showed a dance in Copp's Hill among the tombs with the background of today. Then there were any number of cellar views with monsters creeping in through holes and rifts in the masonry and grinning as they squatted behind barrels or furnaces and waited for their first victim to descend the stairs. One disgusting canvas seemed to depict a vast cross-section of Beacon Hill with ant-like armies of the mephitic monsters squeezing themselves through burrows and honeycombed the ground. Dances in the modern cemeteries were freely pictured, and another conception somehow shocked me more than all the rest. A scene in an unknown vault, where scores of the beasts crowded about one who held a well-known Boston guidebook and was evidently reading aloud. All were pointing to a certain passage, and every face seemed so distorted with epileptic and reverberant laughter that I almost thought I heard the fiendish echoes. The title of the picture was Holmes, Lowell, and Longfellow lie buried on Mount Auburn. As I gradually steadied myself and got readjusted to the second room of deviltry and morbidity, I began to analyze some of the points in my sickening loathing. In the first place, I said to myself, these things repelled because of the utter inhumanity and the callous cruelty they showed in Pickman. The fellow must be a relentless enemy of all mankind to take such glee in the torture of brain and flesh and the degradation of the mortal tenement. In the second place, they terrified because of their very greatness. The art was the art that convinced. When we saw the pictures, we saw the demons themselves and were afraid of them. And the queer part was that Pickman got none of his power from the use of selectiveness or bizarre. Nothing was blurred, distorted, or conventionalized. Outlines were sharp and lifelike, and details were almost painfully defined. And the faces! It was not any mere artist interpretation of what they saw. It was a pandemonium itself, crystal clear and stark objectivity. That was it. By heaven, the man was not fantasized or romanticized at all. He did not even try to give us the churning, prismatic ephemera of dreams, but coldly and sardonically reflected some stable, mechanistic, and well-established horror world which he saw fully, brilliantly, squarely, and unfalteringly. God knows what that world could have been, or where he ever glimpsed the blasphemous shapes that loped and trotted and crawled through it. But whatever the baffled source of his images, one thing was plain. Pickman was in every sense, in conception and in execution, a thorough, painstaking, and almost scientific realist. My host was now leading the way down the cellar to his actual studio, and I braced myself for some hellish efforts among the unfinished canvases. But as we reached the bottom of the damp stairs, he turned his flashlight to a corner of a large open space at hand, revealing the circular brick curb of what was evidently a great well in the earthen floor. We walked nearer, and I saw that it must be 5 feet across, with walls a good foot thick and some 6 inches above the ground level. Solid work of the 17th century, or I was much mistaken. That, Pickman said, was the kind of thing he had been talking about, an aperture of the network of tunnels that used to undermine the hill. I noticed idly that it did not seem to be bricked up, and that a heavy disk of wood formed an apparent cover. Thinking of the things this well must have been connected with if Pickman's wild hints had not been mere rhetoric, I shivered slightly, then turned to follow him up a step and through a narrow door into a room of fair size, provided with a wooden floor and furnished as a studio. An Astelline gas outfit, gave the light necessary for work. The unfinished pictures on easels or propped up against the walls were as ghastly as the finished ones upstairs, and showed the painstaking methods of the artist. Scenes were blocked out with extreme care, and penciled guide lines told of the minute exactitude which Pickman used in getting the right perspective and proportions. The man was great. I say it even now, knowing as much as I do. A large camera on the table excited my notice, and Pickman told me that he used it in taking scenes for backgrounds, so that he might paint them from photographs in the studio instead of carting his outfit around the town for this or that view. He thought a photograph quite as good an actual scene or model for sustained work, and declared he employed them regularly. There was something very disturbing about the nauseous sketches of and half-finished monstrosities that leered around every side of the room, and when Pickman suddenly unveiled a huge canvas on the side away from the light, I could not for my life keep back a loud scream. The second I had admitted that night. It echoed and echoed through the dim vaultings of the ancient and nitrous cellar, and I had to choke back a flood of reaction that threatened to burst out as hysterical laughter. Merciful Creator, Eliot, but I don't know how much was real and how much was feverish fancy. It doesn't seem to me that the earth can hold a dream like that. It was a colossal and nameless blasphemy with glaring red eyes, and it held in bony claws a thing that had been a man, gnawing at the head as a child nibbles at a stick of candy. Its position was a kind of crouch, uh, and as one looked, one felt that, and as one looked, one felt that at any moment it might drop its present prey and seek a juicier morsel. But damn it all, it wasn't even the fiendish subject that made it such an immortal fountainhead of all panic. Not that, nor the dog face with its pointed ears, bloodshot eyes, flat nose, and drooling lips. It wasn't the scaly claws, nor the mold-caked body, nor the half-hoofed feet. None of these. Though any of them might as well have driven an excitable man to madness. It was the technique, Eliot. The curse, the impious, the unnatural technique. As I am a living being, I never elsewhere saw the actual breath of life so fused onto a canvas. The monster was there. It glared and gnawed and gnawed and glared. And I knew that only a suspension of nature's laws could ever let a man paint a thing like that without a model, without some glimpse of the netherworld which no mortal unsold to the fiend has ever had. Pinned with a thumbtack to a vacant part of the canvas was a piece of paper, now badly curled up. Probably, I thought, a photograph from which Pickman meant to paint a background as hideous as the nightmare it was to enhance. I reached out to uncurl it and look at it, when suddenly I saw Pickman start as if shot. He had been listening to the peculiar intensity ever since my shocked scream had waked unaccustomed echoes into the dark cellar, and now he seemed struck with a fright which, though not comparable to my own, had in it more of a physical than a spiritual. He drew a revolver and motioned me to silence, and then stepped out into the main cellar and closed the door behind him. I think I was paralyzed for an instant. Imitating Pickman's listening, I fancied I heard a faint scurrying around somewhere, and a series of squeals or beats in a direction I couldn't determine. I thought of huge rats and shuddered. Then there came a subdued sort of clatter, which somehow set me all the goose flesh, a furtive groping kind of clatter, though I can't attempt to convey what I meant in words. It was like heavy wood falling on a stone or brick, wood on brick, or what did that make me think of? It came again and louder. There was a vibration as if the wood had fallen farther than it had before. After that followed a sharp grating noise, a shouting gibberish from Pickman, and the deafening discharge of all 6 chambers of a revolver, fired spectacularly as a lion tamer might fire in the air for effect. A muffled squeal or squawk and a thud, then more wood and brick grating, a pause, and the opening of the door, at which I'll confess I started violently. Pickman reappeared with his smoking weapon, cursing the bloated rats that infested the ancient well. The deuce knows what they eat, Thurber, he grinned. For those archaic tunnels touch graveyard and witch den and seacoast. But whatever it is, they must have run short, for they were devilish anxious to get out. Your yelling stirred them up, I fancy. Better be cautious in these old places. Our rodent friends are the one drawback, though I sometimes think they're a positive asset by the way of atmosphere and color. Well, Eliot, that was the end of the night's adventure. Pickman had promised to show me the place, and heaven knows he had done it. He led me out of that tangle of alleys in another direction, it seems, for when we sighted a lamp post we were in half a familiar street with monotonous rows of mingled tenement blocks and old houses. Charter Street it turned out to be, but I was too flustered to notice just where we hit it. We were too late for the elevated and walked back downtown through Hanover Street. I remember that walk. We switched from Tremont up Beacon, and Pickman left me at the corner of Joy, where I turned off. I never spoke to him again. Why did I drop him? Don't be impatient. Wait till I ring. Wait till I ring for coffee. Oh, speaking of coffee. Sorry about that. Take it black, Eliot, if you're wise. Yes, that paper was the reason I dropped Pickman. Richard Upton Pickman, the greatest artist I had ever known, and the foulest being that ever leaped the bounds of life into the pits of myth and madness. Eliot, old Reed was right. He wasn't strictly human. Either he was born in strange shadow, or he'd found a way to unlock a forbidden gate. It's all the same now, for he's gone, back into the fabulous darkness he loved to haunt. Here, let's have the chandelier going. Don't ask me to explain or even conjecture about what I burned. Don't ask. Don't ask me either. What lay behind that mole-like scramble Pickman's was so keen to pass off as rats. There are secrets, you know, which might have come down from old Salem times, and Cotton Mather tells even stranger things. You know how damned lifelike Pickman's paintings were? How we all wondered where he got those faces? Well, that paper wasn't a photograph of any background after all. What it showed was simply a monstrous being he was painting on that awful canvas. It was the model he was using, and its background was merely the wall of the cellar studio in minute detail. But by God, Eliot, it was a photograph from life. Whew. What's up, everybody? What up, Slumber? Haley. Is it still glitching out, guys? The live stream? Has anyone seen it glitch out recently? All right. It was still glitching, Reapers? I wonder why it's doing that. I don't understand why it's doing that. Well, if peoples would like this and share this and all that good stuff, you know what's weird? Yeah, no, she showed me that. She showed me the glitching out. Yeah, I don't understand. And Jack showed me too, but I don't understand why. But it's showing it for some people and not other people, which is really odd. I don't understand that. And the way it's glitching is really weird. Yeah, how odd. And I want to say it again. Anybody who assisted me in getting my new video card when my computer died, I really, really appreciate it, because I thought I was screwed. I didn't have any money to fix that. I had no way to fix it. So, like, indefinitely, I thought I was out. Yeah, it sucked. Yeah, maybe it was the Lovecraft, huh? Could have been the Lovecraft. I don't even know if Sinatra's still here. He was the one that was wanting me to read all that Lovecraft. Eyes kind of hurt. It's straining. So how's everybody's week been? Yeah, I'm not sure. Drac, why it was doing that. Because it wasn't doing it. Because I watched it on my own live stream there too. And I didn't notice it doing anything. Like, it didn't do it to me. So I don't understand why it was doing it to some people and not other people. Or at times where other people weren't seeing. I don't know. Didn't really make a lot of sense to me. I didn't get that. And I got this new awesome chair. Thanks to Haley. Oh, you're not the only one that's better, because I can see your face, Haley. I'm much better because I can see yours. Alrighty, so should I switch to reading some creepypastas? Oh, yeah, it always sucks starting a new job, Reaper. That always sucks, because then you gotta like work the 2 weeks to get paid for the 1 week and everything else. Oh, you know what? I did have an update on my Windows when I restarted my computer. So it could have something to do with that too. Yeah, I don't think it's my graphics card because actually my computer itself looks better than it has since I've gotten it. Like just the display in general looks better on my end. So, and it seems that my chat is not disappearing nearly as much. So, that's nice. Welcome back, Devil Jack. Did Four Warnings run away or something? Is that what happened? Is she gone? Four Warnings, where'd you go? Well, considering I just switched my graphics card, though, Drac, it makes me worried that it was interrupting the video, you know? But I think it's all right. I don't think I have any problems with this. Fuck off. God. All right. So if anyone has any stories they would like me to read, you guys know the deal. You can send it to me. Oh, see, Mandy sent me one too. And it all looks the same. Oh, when was Pinky in there? Is Pinky still here? Or did she leave? Oh yeah, it's hot in here. It was hot here today. It was like 80 something today, and it hasn't been dark really long enough to cool down much. All right, so I am going to find a creepypasta to read to let my eyes rest from the book reading there. Has anyone got a particular creepypasta they would like me to read? Or if anyone else has any other stories that they would like me to read, I would be happy to do so. Let's see. Not knocking. I've already done that in my channel. Jack. All right. This is a story called It Has No Face, submitted by Ghost Eye Tree. Everyone has tales about the strange and bizarre. My story is about how my half-whole mask saved my life and continues to save my life to this very day. Late in December, I was traveling north from California to my home state of Oregon. Nothing fancy. I was just going to visit the family for the holidays. On my way north, I hit a small snowstorm. Nothing awful, just a lot of snow falling at once. I wasn't worried about the small increase of snow at first, considering I had snow tires installed before I started my long journey home. I did, however, get a little hesitant to drive when the snow started to really come down. The large amount of falling snow, coupled with the large amount of already littering the ground as I traveled higher into the mountains, caused me to consider finding a place to stay for the night. I figured I could get some sleep while the storm passes over, and the fact I could give my car's heater a break before it would decide to burst into flames, or worse, just stop working altogether. I scanned as much of the landscape as I could, but there was no buildings in the immediate area. The only other option that I had for my predicament was to keep driving and hope there was a town or exit nearby I could take in order to escape from the storm. I must have been driving for at least an hour before I saw a sign up ahead indicating how far the closest city was. My heart sank a little when I read 162 miles as it flew by my windshield and vanished into the snowy night. At this point, the snow was beating against my windshield, and I knew that I wasn't going to last 162 miles, let alone, 162 minutes, let alone 162 miles. The digital clock on my radio read 1:21 a.m., and I decided that the next turnoff I saw I would take and hope that I could find a neighborhood that would produce some results on my current endeavor. My thought my thought process was either freeze to death in my car or stay the night at some random person's house. Weighing the two options in my head, I picked the only thing a sane person would pick and go with a house. Another 30 minutes flew by, and still no luck finding a place to pull off. Just when I was starting to lose hope, I saw a turnoff in the distance. A small shape started to make its way closer into my headlights, and on further inspection, it was revealed to me that there were two wooden poles that possibly belonged to a fence. When I turned onto the road between the two wooden poles, the ground beneath me felt rocky and rough, like I was traveling on gravel. I didn't drive for too long before I started to see a small cabin creep into my field of view. The lights in the cabin were off, but the place seemed to be in good shape. I parked my car under a tall, wild-looking tree that took residence on the cabin's front lawn. Getting out of my car, I immediately grabbed my extra jacket and put it on, pulling the half-whole mask I wore around my neck up and over my ears to keep the heat around my face. I pull I put my cap on and trudged up to the cabin after putting my cap snug on my head. As I traveled through the cold, windy night up to what I felt was my salvation, I immediately regretted not getting any gloves for my hands. Despite the irritation I had with my hands, my face and the rest of my body were comfortably warm, so I didn't have much room to complain. I stuffed my frozen hands deep into my pockets and continued my journey across the cabin's lawn. As I made my way to the door, I noticed something odd. There was no indication of life anywhere. There wasn't even a car in the front yard. Taking my right hand out of my pocket, I knocked 3 times, waiting patiently before saying, Hello? Is anyone in there? I'm sorry to bother you so late at night, but I need a place to stay for a few hours. Nothing answered my plea for help, so I knocked 3 more times on the door, hitting my knuckles harder against the aged wood of the entrance. Hello? I said again, a little louder before continuing with, I'm not here to rob you or anything. I just need a place to stay for the rest of the night. I promise I'll be gone by sunrise. As I finished my sentence, I touched the ornate metal door handle. Noticing that the door seemed to be unlocked, I said in a loud voice, I'm coming in now. If there's anybody in there, let me know now, please. I pressed the metal lever down, finding it a bit odd that the door was unlocked, and opened the door with little resistance on the other end, closing it behind me with about the same resistance, despite the fact the door looked really old. Looking around the area, I noticed that the cabin had 5 rooms. The living room, which was the biggest room, a small kitchen, an even smaller washroom, and what I assumed were 2 small bedrooms in the back. No lights were on inside the cozy cabin, making it almost pitch dark if my eyes weren't already adjusted to the darkness from outside. I decided the best thing to do would be to search for a light switch, so I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight app to scan the walls. My scan produced no results, however, and at the risk of losing precious battery power on my phone, I decided the best option would be to turn off the light and put my phone on airplane mode. Before turning off my light, I studied the paintings hanging on the walls that I glossed over with the initial scan. Each painting that crossed my sight was just typical landscapes or harbors, things like that. There was a painting that looked like a fox hunt or something like that, but other than that, it was just typical paintings you would see hanging on walls around an elderly person's home. There was a painting, however, that caught my attention. The painting was small and consisted of what looked like 2 adults, a mother and a father, a teenage girl, and a small child. The family captured in that painting were wearing what looked like Victoria-era clothing. I'm only guessing about the clothes. I mean, they could have been from the 1800s or early 20th century. The point is the clothing looked very ornate and regal. There was something really disturbing about the image in the painting, though. The faces of each member of the family looked like they were smoothed over with clay. It's kind of hard to describe it, but the 3 family members looked like they had no facial features. By no facial features, I mean, instead of the normal facial features you and I have, the three people in the paintings had grooves of smooth flesh where normally you'd have an eye, nose, or mouth. The only person in the painting that didn't possess a blank face was the teenage girl, which had normal facial features for a teenage girl. In fact, she was quite breathtaking. I pulled myself away from the painting to take a glance at my phone for the time. My phone indicated it was past 2 o'clock in the morning, so I decided to go to the back room and check to see if it was occupied. To my relief, the room was vacant, besides a medium sized bed, ornate dresser, and nightstand where there wasn't much to go by. The walls were blank, besides more sappy paintings to give a little more atmosphere. Although there was no indication of a heating system besides a chimney, the rooms were bearable enough that I figured I could just bundle up in my clothes under the covers in order to stay warm. I was only going to be there for a few hours anyways, so there wasn't much of a point in starting a fire. Plus, the people who owned the cabin wouldn't be back tonight considering how late it was. I hopped into the worn out bed facing the open door next to another door I assumed was a closet and pulled my half whole mask completely up over my face to make sure my head would stay nice and warm for the rest of my stay. Pulling the fabric of my mask down slightly and set the alarm for my phone for 4:30 a.m. and put it back down onto the nightstand. I covered my face again and bundled up tightly with the sheets, closing my eyes and letting dreamland take me away until I woke up after what felt like minutes later to the sound of scratching. My body froze as I heard the noise over and over again, softly coming from the closed door. I tried to relax myself by thinking all the noise that I heard was just a rat or some other animal that was spending the night in the closet while the cabin's owners were away. Quietly, I shifted onto my back, pulling my half whole mask down slightly so that a little slit appeared to give me a small window to look at what was out there. I laid on the bed, stiff as a board, with my cap and mask covering my face in such a way that it acted like a visor, giving me a small peek at what was in the darkness. Thankfully, my eyes were still adjusted to the dark, which gave me a small amount of reassurance as I continued looking in the direction of the scratching noise was coming from. The scratching continued louder and longer for what seemed like minutes until just like that, it suddenly stopped. Silence filled the room again. But it wasn't a safe kind of silence. The deafening silence in the room was a foreboding, ominous sort of silence. The vacuum of sound in the air was the type of silence that happens in a movie just before something jumps out at you. Just when I began to calm myself down, the doorknob on the closet began to jiggle and turn very slowly. My heart was racing out of my chest, and I saw and heard. My heart was racing out of my chest as I saw and heard that doorknob turn. And every inch of my body wanted to bolt out of that bed and out of that cabin before whatever was on the other side of that door got out after me. I laid perfectly still on the bed, despite the fact that I had a cocktail of adrenaline, nerves, and instinct telling me to get the hell out of there. My eyes widened as the door to the closet opened slightly, and I saw what looked like a dried head attached to an elongated neck pop out of the opening, followed by a skeletal body. The thing that was emerging from the closet crawled on all fours out of the doorway and slowly made its way to the bed I was sleeping in. I had never been more frightened in my whole entire life as the thing stood up, almost touching the roof of the cabin, and looked down in my direction. The creature stood there, studying me as I peeked through the thin slit in my mask, pure terror swirling around in my mind as I glanced up at the body of the creature. Looking at the creature's skeletal face, I noticed that it had no eyes in its eye sockets, which led me to believe that it couldn't even see me, though I could see it. Just when the idea of it not being able to see me started to give me a little comfort, the creature began to speak. "Strange," the creature whispered, softly as it continued to watch me, and then began to speak again. "It has no fear of me. the creature continued to say in a hoarse tone as it began to breathe loudly, continuing to look at me and gripping down on the edge of my bed. Feeling the creature's bony hand touch the edge of my bed caused my brain to go into complete panic mode. The only thing that stopped me from jumping up was the thought that maybe the creature believed I was dead or asleep and wouldn't attack. "How can it not fear? How can it not fear me?" the thing said through clenched teeth before loudly gasping and suddenly pulling back with its mouth open in an expression that seemed like fear. "It has no face," the thing whispered to itself as it continued to back away. "It has no face," the creature said again, but this time louder than before and slightly more threatening. "It has no face," the creature shouted as it backed off further away from the bed. I heard the thing breathing loudly and quickly before calming down and slowly returning to the side of the bed. Leaning over me slowly, the creature continued to look at me before softly beginning to breathe on my face. I could smell its foul breath even through my mask. The creature was so powerful that it took all my... Oh, no. The smell was so powerful that it took all my strength not to gag as a reflex to the awful stench. In my mind, I made the choice to keep motionless and not to do or say anything that could compromise whatever illusion I was giving the thing that was currently studying me. The creature breathed on me again softly. The stench I smelled from its breath could only be described as pure death, which only strengthened my resolve to stay perfectly motionless. "Strange," the thing whispered at me again, leaning in close to me to the point where I could see and smell its decaying flesh. The creature slowly reached for me, its hand slowly moving towards my face. With every inch that decaying hand moved, I couldn't help but to feel my situation becoming more and more dire. I thought that this was it for me. The creature would kill me tonight or take me away and torture me and then kill me, and no one would know my story. I could feel tears start to swell up in my eyes as I thought of everyone I ever loved being yanked away from me in this moment. No face, no face, no face, the creature softly chanted as its hands crept ever closer to my face. I could hear the anguish in the creature's voice as it continued chanting over and over as it reached for me. As the creature's long, bony hand crept only centimeters away from my face, I braced myself for the worst, making the last thoughts I would ever have about the people who I loved. Just as I thought my life was over, a sudden loud noise erupted from the room, filling the ear closest to the nightstand with a flood of beeps and causing the creature to scream and jump back. As the noise continued, the creature threw itself back against the wall, shrieking uncontrollably in terror as it stumbled back towards the closet. I was dumbstruck for a second before the thought came to me that I had set my alarm for 4:30 a.m., which must have been the source of the noise. I jumped out of the bed, grabbing my phone and pointing the lit-up screen at the monster as the alarm continued to ring loudly. The loud ringing caused the monster to shriek even more in confusion and terror as it retreated quicker as I approached. Seeing my chance, I activated my phone's flashlight and put it on strobe in order to disorient the monster further. "No face! No face! No face!" the creature shrieked at me as it withdrew to the safety of the closet. I continued to shine my light on the creature, and for added effect, I started playing loud music as I continued to jab my phone into the monster's direction like a lion tamer. The thing threw itself into darkness, The thing threw itself into the dark recesses of the closet, and I shoved the door back, locking it after I slammed it closed. The shrieks came from the monster, started to get fainter and fainter, like it was retreating deeper into the house. "No face! No face! No face!" I could hear the creature yell out as it got further and further away. After hearing the last retreating words of the thing that terrified me the whole night, I bolted from the cabin at breakneck speed, jumping into my car and floored it off the gravel road. I was shaking all over as I drove, and when I pulled my half-hold mask further down and exposed my skin was as white as the snow that littered the ground. I was so frightened by the whole experience, as soon as I pulled into the first town I saw, I parked my car and began to sob uncontrollably for a while. The experience that I had just been through would scare me for life, but as I wept in my car in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven, I couldn't help but to start to laugh a little in between my fits of crying. I got through my ordeal without so much as a scratch on me. Well, besides the mental scars, I was fine. I was alive, and I didn't have to worry anymore. After I finished my whole episode of crying and laughing like an insane person, I entered the store, sniffing and wiping away the rest of my tears. As I continued into the store, the cashier looked up at me and traced my direction with his eyes before continuing with what he was doing. The store was mostly empty. Besides an elderly couple, I was the only customer in there. Had a rough night? The cashier said, with one eyebrow cocked up while he scanned my items. You have no idea, I said, looking out the window at the sunny winter day. I noticed you look a bit upset when you came in. What happened? Did you get dumped or something? He said, looking up at me as the register computed how much I owed him. Looking at the young man behind the register, he seemed to be a bit younger than I was, although that doesn't say much because even though I'm 22, I look younger than my actual age. I looked at the cashier's name tag for a second before feeling that I had nothing to lose by telling him about the night I had just had. The small name on his ID tag read Evan, and as I finished telling him my frightening tale, something odd happened. I expected him to burst out laughing or say it was the best liar he had ever talked to. Instead of doing any of that, Evan just stood there, his skin milk white, as he stared at me with an expression so horrified that he gave me the impression that he had just witnessed someone get run over by a train or something. Evan, are you all right? I said, looking into his eyes while we both stood there quiet. Oh, what? Oh, yeah, it's just... Evan began to say before his thoughts trailed off due to the new feeling that we'd both been watched. I began to feel eyes burn into the back of my head before turning around to see the old couple I glanced at when entering the store beforehand. The old couple possessed the same horrified look that Evan just had a few seconds ago. They must have heard the whole story I told. After a few moments of silence, the old couple asked me what I knew about the cabin, to which I couldn't really say. I gave them the best description I could about what I saw. The couple proceeded to tell me about the cabin, how long it's been there, and that it was haunted by a presence so terrifying that the place was condemned and left to rot away after so many people disappeared there. They told me that no one who ever stayed in that cabin has ever been seen alive again, if they've ever been seen at all after their visit. One of my best friends stayed the night in that cabin, Evan said quietly as he started off into the distance, but continued on with his thoughts. I refused to go in that cabin. I know something bad would happen if we went in. I tried so hard to convince him that the dare was stupid and not to go in, but he refused to be labeled as a chicken and continued on with the dare. Evan's eyes began to water as he continued with his story. I never saw him again after that night. I kept calling his house, but his parents still couldn't find him. We put out flyers and billboards, but we never had any luck. After a few days, we contacted the police and told them all about the cabin. Evan began to choke down tears as he clenched his fists. They found him in the basement of that cabin, sprawled out on the floor. His eyes were surgically removed from his eye sockets, and his nose was removed and his lips. They were sliced off. When they found him, he was naked with an incision from the bottom of his ribcage to his pelvis down to the middle of his body. All of the internal organs were extracted from his body, and to add insult to injury, his genitals were sliced clean off. But you want to know the worst part of it all? When the police did an autopsy, they found that he was still alive during the whole process. Evan winced as he remembered the whole gruesome sight and said, they never found who or what did it. There was no DNA evidence to convict anybody. They didn't find the tools that made the incisions. They didn't find anything. Evan clenched his fist together on the table before the old man, listening to our conversation, put his hand on Evan's shoulder to reassure him that it was going to be all right. As he comforted Evan, he looked at me and said, people have been disappearing from that area for decades. Maybe even centuries for all we know. But the bodies always end the same way, gruesome. I don't care who you are. No one deserves something like that to happen to them. They just torch that evil place to the ground. The old lady joined her husband's side and looked at me with the most foreboding face I had ever seen.
If your story is true, you should consider yourself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. In all my years of living, you are the only one to go into that cabin and come out alive,
the woman said, griping to her husband's hand, groping to the woman said, gripping onto her husband's hand tightly as she spoke to me. After hearing the old woman's words, I realized that Evan said the body of his friend was found in the basement, which explains why the monster's voice got fainter. It would have pulled me into the basement if my phone hadn't gone off. I quickly paid for my items and left the store more troubled than I was when I entered. Feeling drowsy due to the lack of sleep and constant adrenaline rush caused by my whole terrible ordeal, I decided to go to a hotel and spend the day sleeping and relaxing to get my mind off things. That night, I sat on the bed of my hotel room and I looked at the two items that saved my life. In one hand, I gripped onto my half-whole mask, which hid my face from that terrible monster. In my other hand, I held my cell phone, which scared away the horrible beast that could have killed me. I decided that from that day on, I would always wear my half-whole mask to bed. It saved my life. That's the least I can do for it. The recent brush with death I just experienced had taught me that life is too precious to waste. So I decided to ask my best friend Samantha out on a date, and things worked perfectly. Samantha and I were together for 2 years before I recently asked for her hand in marriage, which she said yes. Part of me will never forget that awful night, and because of it, not only have I been wearing my half-whole mask to bed every night since then, I've also made it a priority not to live in any type of house that has a basement. As an added safety measure, I started locking every door before going to bed. It's a pain, but you can never be too careful. Despite these crazy precautions, Samantha has accepted my little quirks and has continued to be supportive as we continue our journey through life together. I couldn't be happier with the way things turned out in my life, and I'm so lucky to be with Samantha. Everything's perfect. There's just one thing that bothers me, and I think I might just have to blame my imagination, but sometimes when I wake up at night when it's really quiet, sometimes I'll hear soft scratching noises. Also, and I think it's just paranoia, but I swear, sometimes I hear something whisper, "No face," from inside my closet. That was actually a pretty cool story. The half-hole mask is like with the holes, where you got the holes for the eyes and stuff. And I got to do a bunch of voices in that one. That was kind of fun. Yeah, I liked it too, Jack. It was a good story. Oh man, this is a story I did on my... Okay, I'm going to read this one. This is a story that I had done. Yeah, I agree. Forewarnings. That was a really good one. I actually, if I could get permission from the author, let me write that author's name down. I apologize. All right, I apologize. But I want to write this shit down. Ghost Eye Tree. All right. If I could get permission from the author, I might actually do that one on my page. Yeah, I'd like to. So the next story I'm going to read is a story I did on my page before I got permission from people, by the way, which I apologize to anyone. Yes, this blue. This blue that a good friend of mine bought me. It's by somebody named Michael Whitehouse, and it's called The Melancholy of Herbert Solomon. Drac, it's debatable. Okay, that's the thing, is it's debatable. Some people get upset. Now, when I first started, I wasn't getting permissions and stuff like that, but that quickly changed once I was getting serious business about this. That's when I started getting authors like yourself, Drac, and like Devil Jack there and a few other people. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I primarily use like a group of like 4 or 5 authors for my stories because, well, first of all, I like all the authors that I use. And second of all, you guys have a lot of stories. Well, Devil Jack kind of ran out of stories, but that's not his fault. It's because I did a whole bunch of them. But it's always better to get permission. When I first started, I didn't really understand the game so much. You know what I mean? Sinatra, why are you on a different account, bro? Is this a different account, Sinatra? Your mom took your phone? My chat's gone. Well, I mean, make sure you sub my account on this one too, and like this, and all that good stuff. And yes, like and share and all that fancy stuff. And if anyone's interested in supporting me at all that information is in the freaking description if you want to. And I also got awesome merch like this. So if you want any of the merch, right there, it looks cool. I like it. I think it looks good. One of my subscribers bought me this. All right, Mandy, drink one for me. All right. So, The Melancholy of Herbert Solomon. On several occasions, my interest in the supernatural has taken me to some of the most prestigious seats of learning in the entire United Kingdom, from the venerable halls of Oxford and Cambridge to the more humble surroundings of the inner-city colleges and schools. My pursuit of evidence to substantiate such claims has rarely been fruitful. However, while exploring the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, I found a rather interesting tome hidden away in the dark and musty corner of the campus library. The book itself was unusual, its cover bound in a weathered and blackened leather which unshamedly wore wrinkles and cracks of time. It dated back to the 16th century and seemed to contain various descriptions and accounts of the daily lives of the people of Ettrick, a small, isolated town built in the south moorlands of the country. Pursuing the volume, there were a variety of entries from a number of authors spanning from a 60-year period. It seemed to have been handed down from town elder to town elder over that time, and to be quite frank, most of it contained idle musings on the townsfolk and plans for a number of humble building projects and improvements. Just as I was about to conclude that the book was of little interest to me, I noticed on the inside of the back cover that someone had drawn a picture. It was elegantly depicted, but I would never have described it as a pleasing sight. In fact, my immediate reaction was one of disgust upon first viewing it. The combination of the harsh, almost angry black lines used and the stark imagery of the scene as relayed by the artist left me with a thoroughly unpleasant impression of its subject. I shuddered as I cast my eye over it in an attempt to take in the picture of what seemed to be of a man, tall, with long, thin arms and legs. His face was partially obscured by one of his gaunt white hands, but what could be seen as monstrous. Predominant veins protruded from his forehead, leading up to a pallid, bald head. As his eyes were deep set into his skull, and the surrounding woods seemed to twist and lean away from him fearfully. At first, I assumed that the picture was some form of hideous graffiti, but at the bottom of the page was inscribed the date of 1578, a rather unusual name, and a rather unusual name, Herbert Solomon. Whether this was the name of the menacing figure in the drawing or of the artist, I did not know. Disturbing yet compelled by that dark woodland scene, I decided that the book required further study. I desired greatly to know who this creature was, and why someone had left the need to capture his strange form in a drawing at the back of a book otherwise used to record the lives of the townsfolk. On closer inspection, what surprised me further was that the same image seemed to recur elsewhere in the book, but drawn by apparently different individuals. Within the book, I found numerous mentions of Herbert Solomon. It became clear quickly that he was indeed the emaciated man in the picture. He had lived in the 16th century on the outskirts of Ettrick Town. It was a small and underdeveloped place, surrounded on all sides by the thick cover of Ettrick Forest, which itself sat in the midst of the vast region of the southern moorland. The town had a small parish church with one humble steeple, an inn normally used by those traveling through the unforgiving countryside, and a quaint cobbled streets which wound their way around the stone cottages and town hall. According to the descriptions in the book, during the December of 1577, children began to disappear from the town. The first was a young girl by the name of Alana Sutherland. She had been playing with some friends by an old well on the outskirts of the town, and had dropped a small toy down the well accidentally, which had caused her much distress. Unable to retrieve it, she returned home to borrow some string and an old hook in the hopes of being able to fish the doll out of the water below. She was last seen walking towards the well, just as the sun had set. In a panic, the townfolk searched. They dredged the well, they combed the wheat fields, and even sent several groups of those willing into the surrounding woods. Alas, the girl was not found. See ya. A few days later, a young boy by the name of Eric Kennedy was running an errand for his grandmother. It was dark, but he had only to take some wool over to the merino place as as a way of thanks for the grain they had provided, and they lived but only a few streets away. It was assumed that at least the center of town would be safe, but the boy never completed his errand. He vanished, as if he were torn from existence. By the end of January, an unusually bitter winter had caused significant damage to the town and its people. Large, thick sheets of ice and snow covered each house and building. Several people died from the cold alone, and the general mood of Ettrick Town was a somber one. Despite these trying times, the townspeople were more concerned with the safety of their offspring. In total, 7 children had now disappeared without rhyme or reason. Whole families wept in despair, and the people of Ettrick began to view one another suspiciously. They knew the truth. Someone was taking their children from them. By mid-February, 2 more had went missing by mid-February, 2 more had went missing, and accusatory glances were now being shared between every family and every member of the community. The town elder decided to act and took upon himself the arduous task of identifying and catching the fiend. Bureaucratic discussions were had, church groups convened, and in every house, in every street, in every corner of Ettrick, one name crossed the lips of its inhabitants: Herbert Solomon. The more the name was mentioned, the more certain his guilt became. Herbert Solomon was an outsider. He lived in a small wooden cabin amongst the woods which surrounded the town, and due to his unfortunate appearance, tended to avoid human contact. What his malady was, no one was sure, and in the unenlightened times of the 16th century Scotland, many believed that he was cursed. Modern eyes would have guessed him to be a victim of wasting disease. He rarely ventured into town except for on a few occasions to trade for supplies. and even in those instances he covered his face with a brown tarnished hat and a gray piece of cloth, which obscured his features below two deep-set darkened eyes. Several of the townsfolk told stories of Herbert Solomon. According to these accounts, he would stand on the edge of the forest watching the farmers till their land, and their children would play in the fields. It was his fascination with children which left many feeling uneasy. Some of the town's children returned home from playing near the woods on a number of occasions with beautifully crafted dolls and toys. They were a present from Herbert Solomon, and being innocent children, they could not know the dangers therein. When the children began to disappear, eyes immediately turned to the strange man living in the woods. Accusations were carried by whimpers of fearful parents, and as the whispers increased in numbers, so did their volume, until it was decided that Herbert Solomon must be stopped. On a cold February night, the elders of the town decreed that Solomon should be arrested immediately. Grief, anger, resentment, and fear grew to a fevered pitch with this news, and every man, woman, and child set out across the fields, entering into the surrounding forest in search of the child killer Herbert Solomon. Details of exactly what occurred that night are limited, but it seems as though the people of Edrictown attempted to remove Herbert from his small cabin by setting it on fire. The crowds cheered as the heat grew and the fire rose. His screams echoed throughout the woods, finally to be silenced by the flames. The townsfolk believed that justice had been done, and while the grief of the parents whom had lost their children could never be quenched, there was at least the satisfaction of knowing that the man responsible was now dead. However, over the following few days, an unease descended upon the entire town. Stories began to spread of strange encounters in the streets at night, a gaunt, shadowy figure prowling the cobbled stones, hiding in the darkness. Within a week, numerous residents claimed to have been woken up during the night to the petrifying sight of an unwelcome visitor. One account was of an elderly lady who woke up to the sound of something rustling under her bed, only to nearly die of shock as a tall, thin man pulled himself out from underneath. She fainted, but not before she saw his face, a withered complexion as if ravaged by disease, his eyes blacker than night, and his hands comprised of tightly pulled skin over a bony interior. Another story consists of a local tradesman who, while investigating a noise from his cellar, was confronted by a hideous figure, so tall and gaunt that it had to haunch over to avoid the low ceiling entirely. The sheet-white face flickered in the candlelight. The man managed to escape, but he refused to re-enter his premises. It became clear to the townspeople that the vengeful ghost of Herbert Solomon was still searching for other victims from beyond the grave, his hate and hideous form haunting the town which murdered him. What's up, the night companion? I just seen you was here. Sorry if you've been here for a minute. It became clear to the oh no, I already said that. With each passing day, the sightings grew in intensity and number. A fog descended on the town, and the people wept and grieved as the sound of Herbert Solomon terrorized each person. Night by night, he was seen wandering amongst the wheat fields, in the cellars and lofts of cottage houses, his long, gaping footsteps ringing out each night throughout the streets of Ettricktown. They had been cursed. In life, Herbert Solomon had taken and murdered their children, and now in death he seemed to possess the twisted means to terrorize the entire town. Then the unthinkable happened. Another child went missing, a young orphan girl, who often wandered the streets when she could not find a place to call home for the night, was heard screaming for her life. The townsfolk rushed to their windows, looking out, but dared not to leave the imaginary safety of their houses, paralyzed with fear. The screaming ceased quickly, and moments later, wandering aimlessly out of the fog, came the menacing figure of Herbert Solomon. He rushed down the streets, his lifeless arms bashing against the houses which he passed, scraping the doors and windows with his rigid fingers, emitting an unnatural yell of anger and hatred on his way. The girl was gone, and the town grieved once more. In the preceding days, the fog grew denser, and with it came an unwelcome news of 2 more children taken. One, a girl whom, after having a raging argument with her family, left the house never to be seen again. The other, a boy named Matthew, the son of a notable drunk who was taken from his own bed by the hands of Solomon while the father lay unconscious from drink. During a church service, the unthinkable happened. Solomon appeared briefly in the aisles of the church, seemingly unaffected by consecrated ground. The congregation whimpered in horror and disdain as his warped, spindly form walked slowly behind a pillar and then vanished. It was indeed a show of influence. Hope was almost lost. Not even a place of worship could deny him, and he was now capable of entering any home at night and then taking whatever or whoever he wished. The town had to act or abandon the place altogether. There was no guarantee that the curse of Solomon would not follow. The local vicar, a man by the name of Mackenzie, was asked by the people of Ettrick to use any sacred power which was ordained to him in an attempt to destroy or banish the spirit of Solomon. A plan was provided. The vicar and a few chosen individuals armed with torches, swords which had been blessed, and vials of holy water would take guard over the town, waiting for the cursed figure of that child killer to show its face once more. Then they would confront him. Observing as much of the town as possible from several house windows, roofs, and strategic street corners, Mackenzie's chosen waited. They did not, however, need to wait long, as that night the lonely figure of Herbert Solomon appeared through the mist, walking the streets of Ettrick with purpose. Yells and screams rang out as people alerted one another that Solomon had returned. Families held their children close as dark thoughts consumed the town. Please spare my child. Take another's. Mackenzie was the first to confront him. His will was shaken by the sight of Solomon's hideous, pallid face, rotted and ravaged. The gangly, spindling figure stood staring intently at the vicar through black, clouded eyes. Another man now joined, then another. Before long, Herbert Solomon was surrounded. Mackenzie instructed the men to slowly close the circle, drawing their swords with one hand while brandishing flaming torches with the other. Fear gripped them, but they knew that this could be their only chance. Mackenzie threw a vial at Solomon's lumbering feet as he uttered a Christian psalm. Another man struck out with his torch. The blow cackled as the cloth-covered arm of Solomon caught fire. Cheers rang out from the townsfolk watching from their homes above. But the man had strayed too close, providing a gap in the circle which Solomon claimed with purpose. He fled. His spindling legs and flailing arms cast spider-like shadows on the walls and cobbled streets as he passed. The townsfolk gave chase, following the pathetic figure as it negotiated each street corner, lane, and country yard in an attempt to escape their rage. The noise alerted the town. Herbert Solomon is trying to flee. What's up, Dark Vampira? From every home across the town, people poured out of their houses carrying whatever they could as a way of makeshift weaponry. They flooded the streets and ran towards the protestations, shouts, and screams of Solomon's pursuers. With every turn of a cobbled street corner, Solomon was running out of places to hide. Finally, as he stumbled down the town's main street, he stopped. The townsfolk had blocked all escape routes. He was trapped. Mackenzie pushed his way to the front of the crowd, asking for quiet and calm as he approached the haunched, defeated figure of Herbert Solomon. He and his chosen few were going to rid the town of Ettrick of this abomination once and for all. Whoa, 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 whoa. Don't be eating me, bro. Vial in hand, accompanied by several large bullish men brandishing swords, Mackenzie approached slowly, reciting verses from the Bible. Through dark eyes, Herbert Solomon observed the townsfolk, their faces etched with hate and thoughts of revenge, moving towards him, and then he simply turned and entered an open doorway next to him. The people gasped, and Mackenzie and his followers rushed inside after him. The house they had entered was still, and lying on the hardwood floor of the main hallway was a pale body of a young girl. Creaking of the floorboards under weight sounded as above numerous pursuers searched the house, disappointed to find nothing. Then something miraculous occurred. The little girl gasped for air. She was still alive. She had little or no strength, and all she could do was utter the word, "Below." In the cellar of the house, Mackenzie found a grim and horrific scene. The floor was covered in blood, and the quiet, dead body of a man lay face down upon it. Chained to the walls of that dim place were the children who had been taken. They were partially drugged, malnourished, and traumatized, but they were still alive. The town rejoiced with the news. Families were reunited, lives were mended, the midst of a bleak and horrible winter slowly lifted, and all seemed well. On regaining their strength, the children recounted what had befallen them. Each of them had been taken by a man called Tom Sutherland. He was the father of the first girl who had went missing, and it appeared that it was he whom had killed her. No one knew for sure, but many were aware of his bad temper, and on more than one occasion he had beaten poor Elena. Consumed by guilt and loss, Sutherland began taking children at knife point and locking them in his cellar, often drugging them with a local herb and occasionally beating them while pathetically weeping in self-pity. On the day that the children were found, Sutherland entered the cellar drunk, carrying a knife and rope. He began striking the children once more and told them that one would die that day. He untied one of the children and pinned her to the ground with his knees. The knife hovered over her neck, but just as he was about to plunge the blade into her, someone entered the house. Sutherland grew ferocious with anger, but whoever was standing at the top of the staircase struck such fear into him that he quickly backpedaled into the cellar. Ducking under the doorway was the tall, scarred figure of Herbert Solomon. At the sight of him, and now being free, the little girl crawled quickly between Herbert's long legs. She was free, but too weak to run. She fainted before she could escape the house. Details of what happened to Tom Sutherland were muddied by the unstable, semi-conscious condition of the witnesses, but it was clear that his neck was broken, his head twisted with such force that it faced an unnatural, opposite direction. There were various accounts of subsequent glimpses of Herbert Solomon, and some of the children claimed to find beautifully crafted dolls and toys on occasion sitting at the edge of the woods. But of course, this cannot be substantiated. Indeed, I would have said that the entire story could not be substantiated, if it were not for the events which I experienced several months after reading that old book, in the depths of St. Andrew's University. A colleague and dear friend of mine had invited me to stay at his family's home for a few days in the countryside. I knew that the house was on the borders, not half an hour's drive from Ettrick, and could not miss the chance to have a closer look at the area. I managed to persuade the powers to be to allow me to take the book from St. Andrew's and show it to my friend. He had a peculiar interest and not insignificant knowledge of the history of the area. I thought perhaps he could shine a light on this curious tale. His family were very kind to me, and the house and its ground were serene in the summer sun, with his children playing in the fields, having carefree and happy time. After reading the book, he told me that it was fascinating and that he knew of a local poem which had been written in the 17th century about a man called Solomon who killed children. But he couldn't tell me any more. The next day we heard screams coming from the nearby house. It was my friend's little girl. We raced outside, following the cries for help over an old fence and down a steep grassy hill. We reached a winding and furious river. The girl had fallen in and was clinging to a large tree root which thrust out from the opposite embankment into the water. The root was wet, and my friend let out a scream of anguish as his daughter lost her grip. Being swept downstream towards a large formation of huge, sharp rocks which jutted out from beneath the surface. The river would not let go, and was throwing her around with such force that it was difficult to see how she could survive. Filled with the abject terror that she could drown, we finally made our way to the water's edge. As we rushed into the murky torrent, we watched helplessly as the poor little girl was about to crash into the rocks. We were too far away. Suddenly, our attention was grabbed by the cracks and creaks of a tall, gaunt figure at the other side of the river, rushing out of the woods at tremendous speed on the opposite bank. With one swift motion, a thin, bony hand plunged into the violent water, prevailing against the immense currents, and finally pulling the young girl to safety. She was alive, frightened, crying, but alive and unhurt. The pale-faced, emaciated figure placed the girl gently on the ground, stared at us from across the water through darkened eyes as we ourselves clambered to safety, then turned and disappeared into the woods, fading away to nothing but a memory. Even in death, Herbert Solomon was the kindest and gentlest of souls. The end. What's up, peoples? To bludgeon the like button. Gonna bludgeon the hell out of it. I do read for days, brother. All right. Let's find another one, shall we? Does anyone have any requests for stories to read? I'll take a poem, Jack. War and Peace. Horace. Wait, War and Peace. Oh, what was that? The Hollowed Men or something like that? Send me a link to it, would you, Jack? Was that right? Was I right, Jack? Was that what it was? Hold on, I'll find it, Jack. I'll find it. The Hollow Men. I got it. Pretty sure this is it. T.S. Eliot, right, Jack? Answer me, Jack. My life story. It all started back in 1981, where I came out ass first and told the world to kiss it as I shat on the nurse who caught me. My legs flopped out and I went running down the hallway, horns blazing, wings just sprouting, tail flowing in the wind. All right, so The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot. We are the hollow men. We are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw, alas. Our dried voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless as wind in dry grass, or rats' feet broken, or rats' feet over broken glass in our dry cellar. Shape without form, shade without color, paralyzed force, jester gesture without motion. Those who have crossed with direct eyes to death's other kingdom remember us, if at all, not as lost, violent souls, but only as the hollow men, the stuffed men. Eyes I dare not meet in dreams, in death's dream kingdom. These do not appear. There, the eyes are sunlight on broken column. There is a tree swinging, and voices are in the wind singing, more distant and more solemn than a fading star. Let me be no nearer in the death's dream kingdom. Let me also wear such deliberate disguises, rat's cloak, crow skin, cross staves, in a field, behaving as the wind behaves, no nearer, not that final meeting in the Twilight Kingdom. This is the Dead Land. This is Cactus Land. Here the stone images are raised. Here they receive the supplication of a dead man's hand, under the twinkle of a fading star. It is like this in death's other kingdom, waking alone at the hour when we are trembling with tenderness, lips that would kiss, form prayers to broken stone. The eyes are not here. There are no eyes here. In this valley of dying stars, in this hollow valley, this broken jaw of our lost kingdoms. In this last of meeting places, we grope together and avoid speech, gathered on this beach of this tumid river, sightless, unless the eyes reappear as the perpetual star, multifoliate rose of death's twilight kingdom, the hope only of empty men. Here we go round the prickly pear, prickly pear, prickly pear. Here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom, between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response falls the shadow. Life is very long. Between the desire and the spasm, between the potency and the existence, between the essence and the descent falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom. For thine is life is. For thine is. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. There you go, Jack. I already had it, Jack. All right. Oops. Red Tide, a poem by Reaper's Whore. It is said that it is better to know the truth than it is to hold to a fantasy. To believe this is to accept the logical, but to act upon love with logic is to remove the curtains of illusion that protect the eyes from the pains of reality. When standing before the ocean of truth, do not bathe in its murky depths. The truth will set you free, free of emotion, free of feeling, free of all but sorrow. Its waters strip the body of its flesh, leaving men naked of all but final reminder to those that dare to drink of its red tide. Yeah, I got that poem there, Reapus. Yes, I did. Almost out of coffee. Anybody got anything else for me here? If not, I'll just read another story. Again, if anyone's here that lended me a hand to get my computer going again, I know I've said this a bunch of times, but other people are coming in and stuff like that. I just want to tell everybody thank you. Thank you so much for helping me out. You got me on Discord, right? The Night Companion? If you got me on Discord, man, you can go ahead and send me a poem. Or on Twitter too. Who is my favorite narrator? You guys might have heard of him. His name's The Crow Flies. No. Honestly, my favorite narrator is probably somebody that goes by the name of Four Warnings. And it's mainly because I use her. I respect her as a narrator because she actually puts inflection and, emotion into her lines that she does for me and everything else. And I also know all the trouble that she goes through for her videos and everything else. So she's actually very good. So if you haven't checked her out, I strongly suggest you should, because she's pretty darn good. But I don't really listen to a lot of narrators. I like the Dark Somnium. I like Ronnie. I like the way Ronnie reads. I mean, that's really all I got. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about people. So I'm not gonna do anything like that. But I like Swamp Dweller. I talk to him every once in a while and stuff like that. Southern Cannibal. I talk to him. I don't mind those two talking to him and stuff like that. And I used to listen to Swamp Dweller quite a bit back in the day. Now I don't find myself listening so much to other narrators at all because I'm just kind of working all the time. I'm working on my own stuff. You know what I mean? So it's hard for me to keep up with other people's stuff when I'm, spending hours a day working on my own. Well, Four Warnings. Did you hear that? Huh? Did you hear me call you out? Where's your poem, Haley? What poem did you write? The Knight's Companion. Were you? Whoa, wait, whoa! You're gonna keep it 3 inches in? Whoa! Wait a minute, what? Just send me it, or send me that, or send me a link to it, or something. Anything like that is fine. It's all good. Just let me know where. Well, I guess if you send it to me on Discord, I'll know. Where did my chat go? Come on, I'm trying to have a conversation here, YouTube. Sheesh. I already had your poem. Well, which one was it, Haley? Send it to me again. Do you want me to read it? You don't want me to read it, do you, Haley? I'll read it. I'll read it. I will read it. I know what poem you're talking about, Haley. Now, oh man, I wonder if I still got it. Actually. Documents. I'm not sure if what's this one? No. I don't think I have the poem anymore, Haley. Oh, wait, is this it? No. Or maybe it's in downloads. I apologize. But that poem, Haley, I'm saving that anyway, so I'm not gonna read that. Not sure where it's at. The Guzozo script. Yeah, I don't think I have that. Born a Sinner, a poem by Reaper's Whore. There is no innocence with age. We are taught to hate from the moment we emerge from the womb. We enter this world bathed in blood. There is no safety from the evils we will face, no comfort from the hand of God, no forgiveness for our sins. We are alone among the many, all destined for the slaughter. Death will find us all, but will we ever truly be free? Life is the ending, death the beginning. The suffering never ends, not in this world nor the next. Pain surrounds us all. Fear cripples the mind. Hatred devours the soul. There is violence in the street, murder in our homes, and hatred in our hearts. God has abandoned his children, and we no longer care. Haley, I think I lost that poem you wrote, which sucks because I need it. Thank you, Devil Jack. No, Jack, it's just a short poem, but I got different plans for that poem, actually. All right. So in the meantime, I will find another creepypasta. All right, here's one. This is called The Dark Man. I don't think I read this one yet. Or did I? Maybe I already read this one. Yeah, I already read this one. No, it did not suck, Haley. How dare you? I have to still have it somewhere, but when my computer crashed, I had that open. So I don't know what happened to the file, and I can't remember what it was called. Which sucks. All right, this one is like popular, right? I'm Not Brain Daddy by writer Josh. I've never been what you'd call a gamer. Sure, I own a console. It's outdated by now, and I like to play the odd game, but that's about it. I'm almost 40, old enough now that when I was in the height of my gaming years, all that really entailed was getting together with friends to play Mario or Castlevania or Excite Bike, Punch Out, maybe Sonic if a friend had a Genesis, which no one does anymore. Keeping up with the latest trends in gaming was never interesting to me. I have a lot of interest reading, watching movies and television, listening to music, but gaming, it was never a hobby, more like a pastime. Well, I apparently need to take a drink of water. Like most pastimes, I don't really understand when someone makes a lifestyle out of it. Today, the gaming scene isn't aimed at the casual gamer. You get accused of being a newbie if you aren't up to date on everything. It's almost a religion. So I leave it alone. I have been content to do so for several years now. For the most part, the gaming world has also left me in peace. There was one time, however, when the gaming world decided not to leave me in peace. In fact, the whole experience was enough to turn me off to gaming for life. It happened at a pretty low time in my life. I had just had my ex-wife file for divorce from me, and I had moved back in with my parents while looking for a new place to live. I'd recently gotten a new job after the one I had been at fired me for all the time I missed due to the divorce proceedings. My new job was as a systems analyst for a major company. I was one of many, a cog in the machinery, but I had been in a few jobs like this in the past, and they all operated differently. Some of them you only had to care about while you were there, while others expected you to bring your work home with you, and I had not yet figured out which kind of job this was. So when the call came, I didn't immediately recognize the voice or the number. My first inclination was that it was probably someone at work. My mother answered it, and I heard from across the room a male voice ask if Brandon was there. My mom handed me the phone. Hello? I answered. Hello, is this Brandon Coates? Yeah, who is this? I need to confirm some codes. At this point, I still thought this was a work call. I didn't recognize the voice at all, but I didn't know everyone at the office yet. Maybe this guy needed me to confirm my employee ID or something, or perhaps he needed me to make sure I had all the access I needed for the systems I was going to be helping maintain. What sort of codes? I asked. Look, the fucking codes you provided aren't working, said the voice. At this point, I began to realize this wasn't a work call. I was momentarily stunned, unsure how to respond to this jackass who was already getting hostile with me. His next words removed any doubt that he'd gotten the wrong branding codes. For NBA Live on Xbox 360? I'm only barely aware of the game system called Xbox. I've never played a game on it, nor did I ever plan to. Also, my job has nothing whatsoever to do with game systems. I'm sorry, I said. I'm pretty sure you have the wrong number. Don't fucking lie to me. The dude was really angry now. More angry than he should be over something as simple as dialing the wrong person in the phone book. You're Brandon Coates. You said so. Now fix these goddamn codes or fuck you, fucking brain daddy punk. Okay, I said. I'm hanging up now. Don't call me again. He was still yelling as I hung up. I didn't give the matter a second thought. Likely the guy was just pissed as someone said things in the heat of anger and he would regret when he calmed down later. But a couple of days later, I got another call. This time, my father answered it, and after a moment, handed the phone to me with a concerned expression on his face. I took it and said hello again. The voice on the phone was not the same man who called before. Brandon Coates? Speaking? Listen, fuck you, brain daddy. You're a fraud and a joke. If I see you again, you're fucking dead. I couldn't help it. I got pissed. Listen, fuck nugget, you've got the wrong guy. I told your buddy a few days ago that I'm not the fucking Brandon Coach you're looking for, and all this call is harassment. Yeah? You want to suck my dick? I hung up. I almost couldn't muster the restraint from keeping from hurling the phone across the room. Who are these people, who are these people, Brandon? My father asked. The look on his face made me realize that he was concerned, not for his son who was being harassed for the crimes for sharing a name with another guy, but concerned about his son who might be involved in something dangerous. I hadn't said anything to them about the last call other than wrong number, but a second call from an obviously different person cursing me out and threatening me. Dad was sitting close enough to me that I know he heard the other person's threat. His suspicions were raised. Good night, Haley. I love you. My parents and I get along okay, but to say they haven't always been on board with some things I pursue is an understatement. For one, they were against my marrying my ex-wife to begin with, and several times in my life I had money problems. I could tell by the way my father asked, "Who are these people?" that he fully expected me to answer as if I knew. He likely thought they were money lenders or worse, wondering if I'd start selling drugs or something. I love you too, Haley. The truth, in this case, would truly set me free, at least as far as he was concerned. They think I'm this other guy who has the same name, I said. They keep calling me Brain Daddy. They think I'm involved with some Xbox 360 or something. I have no idea what they want, but they won't believe they have the wrong guy. Well, these calls need to stop, son, Dad said, the tone in his voice exactly the same as the one he used to use when I was in school. These bad grades need to stop, son. Just the same tone, like the calls were my fault. Honestly, I don't know what to do. Contrary to whatever my father's suspicions are, I have never been involved in any criminal activity. I didn't know how to deal with harassing phone calls. Also, a naive part of me thought the calls would stop on their own. That sounded like the easiest way to deal with it. And for about another week, it was. And then one Saturday, when I had nothing else to do and both parents were gone, the phone rang. Oh, Haley. I took one look at the caller ID and let it ring. The number and caller's name were blocked. It would most probably be someone calling for mom or dad. I had made it a point not to answer their phone if they weren't there. After all, I had a cell phone, and most people who needed to contact me would use that. My parents are very old-fashioned people. They don't have voicemail. In this case, it was probably a good thing that they didn't, or it would have been them that heard the message. They still had an answering machine, as if it were still 1988. Yeah, I got an answering machine. And like all answering machines, it didn't give a shit about privacy. Blasting through the house loud enough that two senior citizens could hear it no matter which room they were in came the following message. Brain Daddy, drawled a gravelly voice. The person on the other end sounded either like they had just woken up or was drunk or had a bad cold. I saw you at GameCon. So beautiful. It was like the lightning through my penis. Man, you're going to take my dick up your ass so soon. There was more, but it was just muffled by curse words. I let it finish, and then I immediately erased the message. I decided it was time to get serious. Clearly, they weren't going to stop. I could hardly believe what was going on. These people, all of them, sounded like young men in their early 20s, tops, had taken what had taken what I was starting to realize was an online vendetta way over the line. Their actions were bordering on illegal, and I knew I had to do something before they decided to, who knows, show up at my parents' doorway armed. I fired up my laptop and Googled branding codes, Brain Daddy. Search results were plentiful. The first 3 hits were nothing close to what I was looking for, but the third had the headline Brain Daddy Branding Codes gives his opinion on Call of Duty Black Ops. There was more, but that was all I needed. Clearly, this was the guy that the asshole calling me had thought they had reached. I opened the link and started to read a little way. It turned out there was a guy in my city, a really young guy by comparison, who did indeed have my name and who was apparently quite the gaming guru. I'd never heard of him because I wasn't a gamer, but if I were, there's no way I wouldn't have known who Brain Daddy was. He had a following on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and several gaming websites wherein he would offer advice, reviews, offer cheat codes, etc. Apparently, he was one of the most sought-after gaming reviewers in my area. He had made friends with some of the most influential names in the gaming scene, and from what I was starting to pick up on, he had also made several enemies. Finding his email was no challenge. As luck would have it, he did have it listed on his Facebook page. It was probably a business address, maybe one that he didn't even personally check, but I didn't care. Even if it was one of his subordinates, even if one of his subordinates read it, they would at least take the message I was about to send seriously. Mr. Coates, you don't know me, but we have the same name, and apparently this is enough for several severely misguided people to confuse us. Over the past few weeks, I had received several harassing, threatening phone calls from people who believe I'm you. I neither know nor care what you did to piss them off so badly, but I urge you to take action into getting all this to stop. You appear to have the resources to contact your followers, and if I were you, I would use those resources to inform them that they have been contacting a person with your name and behaving in an illegal manner. If these calls do not stop, my next step is legal action. I have a feeling you don't want that. I urge you to take this seriously. These calls stop, or you'll hear from my lawyer. I know what you're probably thinking. Why blame him for this? Why threaten him with legal action? After all, it wasn't him that had made the calls. No, it wasn't. But I know, but I know a thing or two about online flame wars, and I know that generally, when it's reached a level like this, obviously had both parties likely share blame. If legal action was being threatened, this other Brandon Coates would take me seriously. It turns out, I really should not have done that. The next call was not to my parents' house. It was to my cell phone. I wasn't able to answer when the call came through. I was at work. In fact, I didn't even see the call until my lunch break. When I checked my phone and saw saw a waiting voicemail. My call history showed one missed call. Naturally, it was a blocked number, and I had no way of reaching the person who had left this message. Of course, I knew who it was. My heart was hammering in my chest, more with anger than with fear, but it was a little afraid too. Whoever these assholes were, they had gotten a hold of my unlisted cell phone number, which I had only recently acquired after changing cities to move in with my parents, in which I had no way, shape, or form put online, even in an email. I went to my car and retrieved the message. I sat there, feeling hotter than I should, considering it was snowing outside, and listened. The voice that spoke was deep, raspy, haggard, and barely qualified as human. Hello, Mr. Brandon Coates, a.k.a. Brain Daddy. Obviously, you don't know what's good for you. You think you can fuck with us, but you're wrong. We know where you live. We've watched you sleep. We're watching you right now as you sit in your car. You will never see us, but we always see you. You belong to us now, fuckball. Your worst nightmare has only just begun. Cold sweats broke out all over me. I was shaking. Never in my life had I felt such fear. My head began to whip around, looking at everyone who was passing by where my vehicle was at. Just on the side of the road, less than a block from my office, that guy in a gray suit was looking at me. No, he was looking behind my car at a female jogger. What about that seemingly benign homeless man just a few feet away? Excuse me. What about that guy that just crossed the street? My gaze went past the man waiting to cross. Behind him was a silent, still figure staring straight at my car. No one else seemed to notice him, but I couldn't help it. He was short, almost dwarfish, and his proportions were strange. One arm was longer than the other, and his head and neck sat at a strange place on his body, almost to his shoulder. He was wearing a Halloween werewolf mask. In shock, I straightened my seat and blinked my eyes a few times. When I looked again, he was gone. My phone rang just then. It sounded to my stressed ears like an air raid siren. We've let you see us, Braid Daddy. I hope you understand we mean business now. I swallowed. Clearly, this person would not be threatened by legal action. What do you want? I croaked. We want you, said the voice, to die. There was silence on the other end for a while. I thought the person had hung up, and then, but first, we'll kill your parents. First your mom, then your dad, so he can watch her die. And then we're going to kill your cheating whore of a wife. Then we're going to kill your brother. When everyone you care about is gone, we're going to kill you. Why? I heard myself ask as if from far away. Why are you doing this? Because you don't know who to fuck with and who not to fuck with, Brain Daddy. You don't know the kind of deep well of shit you've disturbed. Apparently no one told you the kind of things we can do. Or maybe you don't believe we can do them. I hope you believe now, Brain Daddy. I swallowed again. I was totally dry, so it felt like my throat was rubbing against sandpaper. I thought this was just about cheat codes or something. It always starts small, said the voice. It kept getting deeper and more evil sounding if Satan ever spoke to me. I imagined this was what his voice would sound like. High-minded shits like you think you can scam and never get caught. We're here to show you just how wrong you are. You have no idea how badly you fucked up. The line went dead. I spent the rest of that week in a cloud of fear and misery. I could hardly eat. I could barely breathe. I didn't dare call the police or try to warn my loved ones of what was happening to me. I knew they were watching. I knew that one false move from me would only hasten the punishment that they felt I was due. I spent most of my time at home staring at my laptop screen, wondering what I could possibly do to end this hell I had found myself in through no fault of my own. And then, in the corner of my screen, a chat window opened. I hadn't used MSN chat for over a year. Most of the people I used to keep in contact with were no longer part of my life. I'd forgotten that the program was on my startup list and constantly running in the background. At the sight of it, I felt a panic rise. My vision blurred, and for an instant, I was certain it was these people again, and these faceless people who were always watching. But the screen name was Brain Daddy. Here's a copy and paste of our chat. It was still logged in under my now ancient screen name, Drink PBR. Brain Daddy. I'm sorry, dude. I'm so sorry. Drink PBR. What the fuck, man? Brain Daddy. I can't stop what's happening. Brain Daddy. Real sorry. Drink PBR. What's happening? I can't breathe. I'm afraid to go outside. Brain Daddy. It's complicated, man. I can't really explain. I never meant to hurt people. Drink PBR. Dude, I warned you that if you didn't make this stop, I'd get the police involved. Drink PBR. Who are these people? Brain Daddy. Nothing the police can do. Drink PBR. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Brain Daddy. Listen, I don't have much time to explain. They were after him, but I panicked, so I told them I wasn't me. They were after me. It was misspelled. They were after me, but I panicked, and I told them it wasn't me. I saw your name come up on Facebook, and I said that was me. Drink PBR. Okay, first, your ass is so sued. Second, your smug fucking face is plastered all over these gaming sites. How did you manage to tell him I'm you? Brain Daddy. They don't see like we do. Not really. I can't explain much better. They're not like us. They love to play games, but they hate it when you offend them. Told them once to go fuck themselves, and now they want me dead. Drink PBR. No, they want me dead, asshole. Now they're watching me right now, so don't tell me they don't see. Brain Daddy. They hear you and they smell you, but they don't see. Like I said, it's complicated. That's why I'm messaging you. If you don't talk, they don't know. Drink PBR. Just tell me who they are. I don't want to spend the rest of my life afraid. Brain Daddy. That's not how this works. You don't get to escape. They say they're coming for you, then you're dead. Drink PBR. You escaped them by telling them I was you. Brain Daddy. Got lucky. There was another Brandon Coates in my city, but we're the only two. Except he was quite wrong about that. He was the only Brandon Coates in the city. I was in fact born Warren Brandon Coates Jr. I went by Brandon because my father went by Warren. I quickly logged off the chat room and went to work. I went to my Facebook page and changed my name to Warren Coates Jr. I did the same to my Twitter name and my LinkedIn resume and my email address. I changed the voicemail message to my phone to "You've reached Warren," etc. I pulled out my driver's license and smiled, seeing that my name read Coates Warren Brandon Jr., and I waited. It wasn't until the next day that I heard from them again. I let the phone ring, and eventually it went to voicemail. I waited for over an hour, and I had the courage to retrieve the message. It was the same voice, but the tone of this message was light and friendly. "Oh, sorry. I must have the wrong person." I never heard from them again. After a few years, I was able to relax, finally convinced that I was safe. Yesterday, I Googled Brandon Coates' Brain Daddy again. The first hit was his obituary. That suited me just fine. Fuck him anyway. Yeah, right? Fuck that guy. He's like, "Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Never meant to hurt anyone. I just pointed all these murderous motherfuckers in your direction." Yeah, there was a plot hole. The plot hole was the fact that the voicemail said, "We see you in your car right now." But the voicemail, he didn't even notice until lunch, so he wasn't in his car. He was actually working while they said the voicemail. Yeah, I noticed that shit. I remember getting Ghosts and Goblins. That game was hard. I mean, I beat it, but it was hard. Oh, was it hard? All right, I will do one more story. The Night Companion. Were you gonna send me the story? That'll be my final story. And I'm so glad that my computer's fixed and I was even able to do this. I thought the funny games was over, guys. I seriously did. I thought it was done and I wasn't gonna be able to do this anymore. I was like, God damn it. Why is my chat still disappearing? What's up with that? I don't even call it fans, man. It's just people that support me. You know what I mean? And that's freaking awesome. Did I get it? How'd you send it to me? I apologize. Oh, okay, here it is. Here it is. Is this? All right. Sorry, there's a poem here that I'm going to read. I'm just double checking, making sure it's the whole thing here. Oh, it's not the whole thing. Oh, my email. What? I haven't gotten an email, brother. Yeah, I haven't. Oh, wait a minute. Let me look at my spam folder. It might have ended up there. Nope. No, I haven't gotten an email with it yet. Try sending it to me again. Some reason sometimes my email it like doesn't show me anything. Oh, link. Oh, I got you. My bad, bro. There you go. And I will link it here as well. If anybody ever wants to send me a story or anything of that nature, that's my email. Feel free to do it. Who is harassing forewarnings here? What is going on here? What are you guys doing to poor forewarnings? All I hear is don't fucking touch me. Fuck off. That's all I see. And when the crow can't fly, supporters got to lift him up, plain and simple. Well, no, I appreciate that. Boy, did I appreciate that, because I was screwed. Like there was no way for me to fix that. And I wasn't gonna ask for any help. I was just like, oh, fun and games are over. I'm screwed. You know? But forewarnings and Johnny and Jack were all like, nope, we're gonna do something. And it was so fast too. It was like 12 hours. And then I had enough money to replace the graphics card. I just had to make sure. I was worried that it wasn't just that too. I was worried that I was going to spend that money on a freaking new video card and put it in there and something else was wrong with it or something. You know what I mean? I was like, oh no. Oh, and also, I think that I am going to stop putting out videos every single day. I think I am going to change it to 3 days a week. So it's 3 videos a week plus the live stream. So it'll be the live stream and then 3 videos. I haven't really decided on the day yet. But I was pretty much beating the hell out of myself by putting out a video every day. And okay, here we go. Not only that, I'll get to reading that in just a moment. Not only that, but I noticed that a lot of people were actually having trouble keeping up with all my videos anyways. Yes, it sent it now. It absolutely sent it. So I do have it now. Wait. Yes. Yep, got the whole thing here. But yeah, I think I'm going to do 3 videos a week plus the live stream. And that'll give me a little bit of break. I won't be worn so thin, and then everybody, they won't have to feel like they're freaking getting stretched out or something like that, trying to just keep up with my videos or something. You know what I mean? All right. So this is written by the Night Companion. It is called Ghost children in the attic. The silence of night becomes restless as the floorboards set the scene of this old home. During the day, things seem clear, but at night I hear I am not alone. An old Victorian with rich history of questionable events, a house most children dare not come by because the whispers of gossip seem to never die. Echoes in the distance, whispers by your ears, the small footsteps of paddling children that haunt my dreams. I hear them become more real than what I would wish them to be. Every night I hear that of what I cannot see. As I investigate these sounds, I lose my grasp on reality. Their laughter is ever more unsettling as the night grows darker, a concept I am now growing to hate as I am seemingly suffering from insomnia. Shadows merge within the walls of my home, giggling 4-foot beings that never leave me alone. They run and seek only to torment my mind, always in sequence upon witching hours' time. These are the demons, not of children I speak, the masters of floorboards that eerily creak, each of their steps tapping down like a tick on a clock, wanting to play who's there, knock knock. I'm curious to know, but I refrain from doing so, how these noises consume me unknowingly slow. I can't hold back any further, so I pique my interest and investigate against the conscience of my mind, knowing that danger is seemingly around the corner. Slowly my steps match up to the taps, of which I follow. Grim are the fields that I consistently swallow. The offbeat rhyme makes the racing pace of my heart, for fear is unknowing what's ahead from the start. I'm now coming closer to the sounds I normally ignore. At last I come around and enter this area to see what's in store, only to reach a conclusion that nothing was there. How foolish was I? Crazy? No. I'm imagining things that aren't even there. I'm doubting the concepts of reasoning, as it has me at a stand still to know what is going on now. I put these thoughts behind. I conclude to ignore them as I once did before. How foolish was I to say nevermore. A few days go by, and the troubles seem to disappear. Things were becoming pleasant. A life was a journey I could steer, until a storm nearby darkened the skies. And left me without comfort of light. A now dimly lit room, the shadows dance across the walls. My anxiety becomes my plight. I remember this remember this moment, as scenes so familiar with every component. The pieces of a nightmare waiting to merge. Then, of course, they come out to play. Thoughts I once removed and had considered them to have gone purged. The sounds of the echoes rippled through the air, whispers that kept me awake, always infectiously in my thoughts, and the children's laughter won't stop for God's sake. Once again I remain fastened in my seat, as the pulse that courses through my veins becomes slowly throbbing beats. I can't endure this. As I mustered the courage to see why these entities have come to bother me, I walk to the sound of this haunting moment, as I seek to further end this wretched disturbance. Once more I find nothing, but soon I find myself displeased. The sounds were becoming an annoyance. that I could not let go with ease. So I search and search what keeps me wondering at night. I've checked every corner, every room and closet, but one place I've never been was the attic of the home. I've never had the reason to enter or observe what lies up there, because to be honest, I'm a bit frightened of extremely dark places. The attic remains the one area of this home I would not go, but of course, to end this nightmare, I must search everywhere, including where I do not venture. The ascension into the unknown becomes more dreadful than what I could have imagined. See, the stairs become the steps into dark space of nightmares. One step at a time, I said to myself, one breath in every moment. I find myself at the top of the steps. I see but items that were left behind by the previous occupants. So, moving around carefully, observing each relic in its place. But soon my calm demeanor gets the sudden chill up my back, to which I give haste. Never did I cower so much behind the comforts of old boxes and outdated furniture, feeling frightened and helpless to the entities lurking in the shadows. But that was the moment I could clearly see what had got my attention to search for those who be, walking and haunting my place of dwelling. My eyes become full as the evident force in front of me becomes a force compelling. My senses and fears come to peak as I know why the floorboards creak. In front of me lies the embodiment of a child, hanging and swinging back and forth from a noose. I was scared, I do admit. My eyes and brain were saying, screw this shit. I ran out of there faster than I've ever ran in my life, as the only thought embedded in my mind was the image of a hanging. But that wasn't the thing that scared the most by far. It was the grin and the stare he gave me, although beside of him was a little girl pointing at me, all of which she had the same lifeless stare and unsettling grin. So what hell have I gotten myself in? Needless to say, as the sounds continued to press to me, the shadows of these ghost children in the attic will remain up there, for I dare not go up there at all. Be my guest and follow their call. The sounds that creak inside this home are sounds engraved in my mind as known. From I hear it, I can only think that unsettling swinging motion of that children upstairs. The Night Companion. All right. Well, guys, it's been about 3 hours, so I think I'm going to have to call it. If you haven't liked it, please like it. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging out. It's been good. I'm glad that I could do this today. So, I mean, it's not quite Murder Monday, but it's Take Tuesday. Ain't that right? For warnings. Yeah. It's attempted Murder Monday. So again, thank you everybody for coming. It's been fun. Yeah, April made it. Carrie made it. Nice. Crow Wednesday. Nah, it's Wednesday warnings. Thank you, Devil Jack. Appreciate you guys. But y'all have a good night. See y'all next Monday. Wait a minute.
Stay a while and listen.
I guess you already did that though, huh? All right. Y'all have a good night.